Last Friday at 5:15 p.m., all eyes were on X. The big question, would Michael Saylor's strategy finally be added to the world's premier stock index, the S&P 500? After a record-breaking Q2 and ranking as one of 2024's top-performing stocks, Bloomberg reported that strategy had checked every box for inclusion. Analysts projected a potential $16 billion in passive fund inflows and an immediate 8% price surge in their stock if strategy made the cut. But when the announcement hit, strategy was left out. Instead, names like AppLovin and Robinhood got the nod, while Saylor was excluded. Why? Because it's not the rules. Strategy met the criteria. The truth is that the S&P 500 isn't a rules-based index. It's essentially an active fund run by a secret committee. Did you know that those committee members aren't even publicly disclosed? Imagine investing in a fund where you don't know who makes the calls or why. It's wild when you consider that Coinbase, a company that literally listed a token called Fartcoin and holds just 11,000 Bitcoin in a treasury, was included. Meanwhile, you have Strategy, a Bitcoin-only company with 636,000 Bitcoin, and one of the largest fixed income IPOs of the year was not added. Saylor himself admitted he did not expect to make it on the very first quarter of eligibility, but he remains confident. Today on CNBC, he went on and said, "We figured it'll happen at some point. Every quarter, we make new believers, more banks, more politicians, more credit rating agencies, and that will continue for the foreseeable future." Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace, and I'm very glad to have you as we are joined today by Pascal. Pascal, how you doing?
Hey, Rob, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. You are over there in Europe. You are an author of a book, The Bitcoin Enlightenment, co-author, as well as the host of Less Noise, More Signal, a wonderful Bitcoin and macro podcast. So yes, very excited to have you on the show today to give your opinions and your viewpoints on a really chock-full week of eventful stuff happening. So Pascal, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you got going on in Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the quick introduction. So yeah, as you said, my name is Pascal. I'm currently in Switzerland. That's also where I'm originally from. Grew up, born and raised here in Switzerland, and then came around the world just a tiny bit, visited some countries. Was traveling as a digital nomad back in the days. Also really experiencing what it's like the Bitcoin adoption all over the world, hit like countries like Argentina, Paraguay, where I checked out some miners on site, which was very interesting. I went to Turkey, I went to South Africa just to see what Bitcoin adoption is like. And one of the countries I was visiting as well was Mexico, and that's actually where I met a very famous gentleman. His name is Ricardo Salinas. He's the third richest man in Mexico, and that's also who I co-authored the book with. I did write it with another friend of mine out of Switzerland, but then Ricardo Salinas is like the big name sort of sponsoring this entire project as well. And so that's how it came about. As you said, currently I do work for a bank as well in Switzerland. I help them on the Bitcoin side and just scaling out their business when it comes to Bitcoin products and just managing the module that we have as well, where Bitcoin is a part of it. And then I do have the podcast that you mentioned. I lecture on blockchain, Bitcoin, and crypto assets as well. So it's pretty much different hats that I'm wearing, but all within the wider Bitcoin space.
Nice. So, I mean, you've seen Bitcoin around the world. You have the institutional background from working in a bank. You definitely have been through the ropes and you know your stuff. So very excited to have you on today. And interesting tidbit that we can just bring up real quickly. You worked with Ricardo Salinas working on the book that's right behind you. But yes, just this weekend, it came out that both Ricardo and Michael Saylor have cracked the top 500 richest people on Bloomberg's Billionaire Index. So both of them coming in at over $7 billion here in the top 500 richest people. So pretty cool accomplishment you got going on right there. But yes, today we are here to break down the headlines in our newsletter. Bitcoin News Weekly comes out every Monday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern. And it goes straight into your inbox, gives you all the information of the biggest news that just happened in Bitcoin, keeps you up to date so you don't need to spend your whole entire life scrolling on X like I do here in my apartment. It's lots of fun. I love it, but we'll save you the time and you can just tune in once a week. Join us on this live stream. If you're watching live right now, hit that like button, share this video. Let's get the Bitcoin signal out there to the rest of the world as we discuss this headline this week. S&P 500 says no to Saylor, but corporate America says yes to Bitcoin. Strategy may have been denied S&P inclusion, but a new River report shows businesses across America are adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets like never before. So, yes, we will dive straight into the headlines. And we always start off with the adoption section because adoption is what we like to see. Our tagline here is accelerating adoption. And we start off with a headline that was super interesting from last week. A new scientific paper explores Bitcoin as an interplanetary monetary standard for Earth-Mars trade, proposing proof of transit timestamping, a cryptographic audit trail for BTC over intermittent links. So yes, last week we were contacted by the author of this paper, who wanted to show us that they had published this, and it's some really cool stuff. It's you can dive into the jargon right here. This paper explores the feasibility of deploying Bitcoin as the shared monetary standard between Earth and Mars, accounting for physical constraints of interplanetary communication. We introduce a novel primitive, proof of transit timestamping, to provide cryptographic tamper-evident audit trails for Bitcoin data across high latency, intermittently connected links. So this paper, it's a real thing. It's been submitted to academic journals, and you can see here they've got all the diagrams of everything of how you can transmit Bitcoin transactions across planets. Because I'm not sure if you know about this, Pascal, but Bitcoin is it travels at the speed of light, of course. But when you're dealing with planets, Earth and Mars are at different distances depending on their orbits, right? So Earth and Mars can either be between 8 light minutes or 22 light minutes away from each other. So you need to account for that and make sure that all the transactions are stored on the Bitcoin blockchain, that there is no double spend, because that, of course, does not work with Bitcoin. And that way we can ensure a fair and equal decentralized ledger across planets. Did you hear about this paper, and what do you think is going on here?
Wow, crazy. No, I haven't heard about that paper, but it's really interesting. I gotta say up front that this is obviously way above my pay grade when it comes to like analyzing what's happening here. I'm just a simple dude, like interested in Bitcoin for quite some time, and yeah, for that reason, I probably can't really comment on the technicalities when it comes to the paper, but in general, I mean, I've talked to more or like smarter people than me, you know, from within the space. One person that comes to mind that's talking about these type of things, I think, is Drew Bunzal. You know, I think he's with Unchained, and I listened to some podcasts that he was on, and he was talking about the intergalactical aspects of Bitcoin, interplanetary wise, you know, and so I think there's certainly yeah, there's some merit to this, you know, because in the end, I see it with the traditional money, you know, at banks, how slow it still sort of is because of the whole regulatory framework that's wrapped around it. And I think we're not going to get rid of this anytime soon. And that's why we need like a real protocol level based money, you know, which is sort of decentralized and hosted by various nodes around the world, and potentially then later on outside of the world and on other planets, maybe even on Mars, you know. And so I think that's very important. I mean, I usually do this, like sending Bitcoin at the light at the speed of light, you know, it's so impressive. When I do the lecturing at the university that I'm at, I usually do the cat feeding. Maybe have you seen that? There's a
Yes,
website, Lightnings and Cats. It used to be like Polo Feed, where I was feeding the chickens somewhere in Florida, I think was that guy that hosted that site. And that was so amazing because that's really, I can talk for 2-3 hours about Bitcoin. People find it interesting. But whenever I pull up this website, I pull out my Lightning wallet, I do a transaction, it hits immediately. The people are like flabbergasted. I'm like, wow, that's very fast. You know, that's how Bitcoin works. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. that's exactly it, like streaming money at the speed of light, and so I can definitely see that we need something like this in the future. I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. I know he's committed to bring us to Mars sooner or later, and that's also where I still think that's where he got originally interested in Bitcoin, even though he might have gone astray a little, with his Dogecoin talk and stuff. But I think deep down inside, he's still a Bitcoiner just because of this, because he sees that there is a connection, and it's inevitable in the end that something like this is around. So happy to see this paper published, and for all the nerds, they can definitely read and tell us if there's any validity to this. But I would argue there is.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is here to solve the biggest problems, right? And thus, we must make sure that it can go as far as human beings can. And so it's just amazing the talent that Bitcoin attracts to it. You've got all these different minds thinking, whether it be at the scientific interplanetary level or the philosophical or the mathematical. It really doesn't matter. You bring your expertise to Bitcoin, and there's a way to apply it. And it's just so amazing to see these different scientists come up with actual answers to it. Is a real question, right? I mean, if we're going to have a monetary standard that spans the distance of the solar system, it's going to need to deal with the constraints of physics. And one of those is the speed of light, right? So if we are to be an interplanetary species, it probably makes sense. So we want to have the same kind of money on all the different planets. And this could possibly solve that problem. So really cool to see. And I think a great way to start off this conversation. We're thinking big brained over here. You can go and check out the paper itself. It is the author's name is Jose Puente, and I believe his brother Carlos Puente. So it is called Bitcoin is an Interplanetary Monetary Standard with Proof of Transit Time Stamping. So now back down to earth. When we talk about adoption, we talk about real life people spreading the word about Bitcoin, and that's what happens at Bitcoin conferences. So here we have Treasury BTC. This is a new Bitcoin treasury company launched out of Amsterdam. They are backed by the Winklevi twins and David Bailey over at Nakamoto. They made a big splash last week by acquiring, I believe it is 1,000 Bitcoin to start their treasury. And another part of the deal is that this new Bitcoin treasury company acquires the Bitcoin Conference Europe that takes place in Amsterdam every year. While Bitcoin BTC Inc. plans to license the Bitcoin Conference and Bitcoin Magazine to publicly traded treasury firms worldwide, driving grassroots Bitcoin adoption. So we saw this with Metaplanet. They licensed Bitcoin Magazine Japan to Metaplanet, and now Metaplanet publishes that magazine over there in Japan. And this is certainly interesting. Have you ever been to the Bitcoin Conference in Amsterdam by BTC Inc.?
No, I haven't actually. Yeah, that's one of the conferences I haven't gone to. I was thinking about going this year, but I haven't made it in the past. I went to some other places, obviously in Europe, where they have conferences like the BTC Prague, for example, a very famous one. But Amsterdam, I haven't made it yet. So definitely something which I think is worth, from what I'm hearing from colleagues that have checked it out in the past, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, BTC Inc., of course, they put on what you could consider the world's premier Bitcoin conference, of course, in Las Vegas this year. They do it here in Amsterdam, you can see. But now they are licensing out these conferences in these different countries where they are seeding their Bitcoin treasury companies. And I do think that is a very interesting and novel approach to getting grassroots Bitcoin adoption, because there really, so many people have started their Bitcoin journeys at one of these conferences. And these guys are really professionals of what they do now. I mean, as you can see from this video, this is top of the line event production. The venue itself in Amsterdam looks really, really cool. Would love to get there one day. But this seems like a novel approach to getting more Bitcoin conferences out there. And I'm excited for this. I think this could be great for Bitcoin adoption.
And I think it's only just starting, these convergence that like different venues and avenues that we have given the Bitcoin industry, be it like these conference organizers, but then you have the treasury companies, you have the banks, whatever, they're all sort of in their own vicinity, so to say. But I think they're now branching out into each other, and there's really like some convergence happening. And I think from what I'm hearing, it's not official yet, so I can't really tell. But I mean, behind the scenes, I know there's other Bitcoin conference organizers now actively working together with treasury companies and building out like different event sections all throughout Europe, and then potentially spanning out to the entire world. So I think this is only just starting, and so it's just interesting to see that we see this sort of convergence where these things come together, and I think in the end this just strengthens the entire industry as such.
Yeah, I mean, these Bitcoin treasury companies, a lot of them seem to be in search of a product, right? And events, a Bitcoin event, a premier Bitcoin event, definitely seems like something that is able to, you can sell tickets to, right? You can get cash flow by putting on these events. And now that they've got the whole entire organization of it down to such a science, I really think that it could be an easily replicatable model as long as you can market it correctly, depending on what market you're in. But you are in Switzerland, you are in Europe. Can you tell us about the state of Bitcoin adoption in Switzerland? We know Lugano is a hub for both Bitcoin and Tether when it comes to cryptocurrencies over there in Switzerland. But what is it like on the ground? Do Europeans like Bitcoin, and is it growing in acceptance there?
Well, yeah, I think you obviously have to sort of differentiate Switzerland from the rest of Europe, even though we're part of Europe, we're in the heart of Europe, but we're not part of the EU. We still have sort of our own little village, which is somewhat protected from the overlords in the EU. We usually call it like this, And so I think because we're structured differently, Bitcoin is especially well received in Switzerland, because Switzerland is a small country. It's like the smallest beautiful type of country, where also we're quite decentralized, like this federalist approach that we have, with the cantons. So it's pretty much, it's closer to the US in that sense, but just on a smaller scale, which I think still lends some credibility to the entire system, and then we don't have this overarching like federal state which tries to mess with everything on the cantonal level. And then we have like one level even deeper, where it's like down to the municipalities who can actually also decide on a whole lot of things, within their sort of area. And so because of this ethos that we have in Switzerland, obviously a lot of people, I would say, or disproportionately a lot of people get the idea of Bitcoin, just because it's somewhat natural to, okay, we understand decentralization, we understand something which is maybe stable, also maybe it's sort of slow, you can't really like change it, it's like slow code in that sense, but that's exactly what's lending it its stability and reliability, because it's the same with Switzerland. That's an argument we usually hear, like the Swiss, if we need to change something in our political system, it doesn't happen overnight, because we have to kind of call in a referendum or an initiative where people have to vote on it, and then you also have to kind of get all these signatures to even start something like this. And so it usually takes several months, for things to actually change. Obviously, there is a political cast as well, and it's probably growing, and we don't like it, but it's still somewhat comparatively well run. And that's why I think in Switzerland, it's still so much further in Bitcoin adoption. Also, obviously in crypto adoption, crypto things are also going on over here. We have the crypto valley, it's called, but at the heart of it, Bitcoin plays a very important role, I'd say. And we're host to many important companies. I think we're host to a lot of Bitcoin itself, like where custody is happening. I mean, there's the infamous Zabo Bank, where like I think one of the earliest Bitcoin events is Casares. He was an Argentinian who orange pilled almost all of Silicon Valley at that point, and he's said to have his company with the whole custodial setup still here in Switzerland. And so I did a research for my book as well, and it said that I don't know if it's really true, but 5 to 10% of all custodied Bitcoins are actually held here somewhere in Switzerland, in a mountain, deep down inside in a bunker. again, I don't know if it's true, but obviously Switzerland having this renommee and reputation, it could definitely be true that a lot of wealthy people who hold Bitcoin and maybe have some of it not in self custody but custody with somebody else, look to Switzerland to do this. So I think we're ahead of the curve when it comes to adoption. Obviously, now with the US opening up, a lot of people here within the industry are sort of not frightened, but they're like, okay, now if the US is coming on board and is really like seriously like taking this seriously, then the US is always the big guy. They move the needle, and then maybe the Swiss banks also sort of have to kind of pack it up. Maybe not entirely, but we're going to be under competition for sure. And that's what a lot of people are looking to the US and like, okay, this is in some sense great that like if the US is moving, everyone else will feel compelled at some point. But at the same time, it's also maybe we lose some of the competitive edge that we had so far. So definitely interesting times for sure.
Yeah, one thing that you brought up that was really interesting is the referendum aspect of your nation, right? If you guys want to make a change, you can propose it, you get enough signatures, and then they can kick it up a level to the legislature, and people will vote on it there, right? So I do know that there was a referendum to add Bitcoin to the national reserves of the Swiss National Bank. It was collecting some signatures and was doing well, but I haven't heard about it in a little bit. Could you give us some more info on that?
Well, I don't know the exact state of it either. Like, I think it's still undergoing like the collection of all the signatures. I think it wouldn't be finished until somewhere next year, 2026. I think is where they actually where this window closes where they can collect all the signatures. I would assume by like the many grassroots like movements we have here in Switzerland that we will make it and we will get the sort of the signatures that we will need in order to pull this off. And then I think it's an initiative, sort of what we call it, an Initiative in German. And that's why we need 100,000 of these like signatures. But as I said, I think it will be safe to say that we will get it. And then it will take another 2 or 3 years for like the committee and everyone involved in the political environment to wrap their head around, and then maybe the earliest it would actually be in front of the people to vote on would probably be 2017, 2018 even. So it might still take another cycle, which might also be sort of good because adoption is even farther. And as you said, it would be the goal to have the SNB, which is the Swiss National Bank, invest in Bitcoin. And even though we're not sure if it's going to go through, maybe in 2020, as I said, we're already a lot further, but we'll see. I mean, in the end, from thinking from a shareholder of the Swiss National Bank, which there are actual shareholders. It's like this private public conglomerate. The cantons are most of the shareholders, so it's like these public entities which are shareholders of the SNB. For them, I think it would make sense because, as we know, Bitcoin is the best performing asset last decade. It's poised to be maybe again the best performing asset this decade, and just based on these numbers, I think rationally thinking, having 1 or 2% on the S&B's balance sheet in Bitcoin would probably be a smart move. And so we'll see how this turns out, but it's still interesting that something like this can happen here in Switzerland for sure.
Yeah, the Overton window has definitely shifted. We've got people like Larry Fink saying you need to have at least 2-3% of this on your balance sheet in order to protect yourself to the upside, right? I mean, and in order to get those signatures for the referendum, you need widespread awareness of Bitcoin just in general, right? And we are much further than we were, say, just 5, especially 10 years ago. But we are seeing Bitcoin seep into the mainstream, and that makes things like getting signatures for a referendum much easier. And one piece of evidence of this seeping into the mainstream is this. We have Killing Satoshi, directed by Doug Liman, of the Bourne Identity, the director of this famous movie. It will star, he's putting together a new film that will star Casey Affleck and Pete Davidson. set for release in 2026. It explores Bitcoin's creation and the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto. So we've got Hollywood coming in for Bitcoin, right? The real quote here that I found interesting was from the producer, Ryan Kavanaugh. He said, "This is not a movie about Bitcoin and its elusive, mysterious origins, but really about what it stands for. We look at this film much the same way we did with The Social Network and its examination of Facebook. This should equally be a look into the world of what Bitcoin really is." So, I mean, if we can get a Bitcoin movie on the level of production of The Social Network, that would go a long way, I think, in opening people's eyes to the idea of Bitcoin and how it can change their lives. Did you hear about this film?
Yes, I heard about it. Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to it because like the Born Identity and the whole trilogy that I think there is was probably one of my most favorite movies that I ever watched, and still sort of I'm like reminiscent about it, when I first watched it. It was so nice. So coming something along these lines, and being about Bitcoin, that's certainly very interesting. I hope, like, the quote is very hopeful, and I mean, it would be great, to have, as you said, something which is close to The Social Network, which I think got a lot of attention, for the fact that you're viewing the product, because it's for free, and then also because of the entire dopamine issue, that comes with social media, and a lot of people, I think, got really hit by this movie, and so if the same can happen with Bitcoin, but in a positive light, I mean, that would again be very enlightening and just very great for the cause of Bitcoin. I just hope that in the end they're picking the brain of the right people when it comes to Bitcoin, because obviously Hollywood may be left leaning. I don't know. That's some of the impressions that I got. They might then turn to the wrong people, which maybe are Bitcoiners, but then also chill all this other stuff, and then sneak in their own sort of tokens again. And then in the end, it would just be interesting to have like some true believers, if it's really about the cause, what they say, what Bitcoin is really about, because Bitcoin in the end is it's not about shitcoining, it's about Bitcoin. And so that would be something I hope for, that we get the right people involved in the production of this movie. But other than that, I think it would again be a great opportunity to spread the word about and the knowledge about Bitcoin and what it's really about. Yeah.
Yeah, and as of late, we have seen other films and movies come out about Bitcoin, but many of them are documentaries, right? And when it comes to the mainstream publications, such as Channel 4's Seeking Satoshi and HBO's Money Electric, the Bitcoin mystery, they really try to find out who is Bitcoin, who is Satoshi, right? And try to put a name and a face behind Satoshi Nakamoto. But this one is fictional, right? And we've got actors like Casey Affleck and Pete Davidson who are well known, and it's more, I think, looking at it from a social lens rather than trying to say, oh, this guy is Satoshi. So it's nice to have a break from people trying to constantly pin down who Satoshi is, because Satoshi obviously wanted to be left alone and be private. So I think he gave us Bitcoin. We should give him that grace of not trying to dive into who exactly he is. And especially, did you see Money Electric, the HBO one, where they said that Peter Todd was Satoshi?
Yeah, only parts of it, actually. Yeah, and it was shown at Plan B, the network, I think, in one of the sideshows, and I think I checked some of it out. But yeah, in the end, you're right. I mean, if this one were to be like a real action thriller, where it's not even like a documentary type, but really the story of Satoshi told within an actual movie, that people like to watch, then I guess, the spread would be even further, like the people we could reach, because like documentaries, I guess, we as Bitcoiners are used to watch documentaries about the fiat system and other things, but most people probably are sort of bored. But then if it is an action thriller, maybe it even shows up on these airplane programs around the world, and then people can watch it, and that's what I think would be most beneficial for our cause in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, as a Bitcoiner, we feel naturally the desire to spread the word about it because of how it's benefited us personally, and we think that it can benefit the world. So if you are here watching this live stream and you're a Bitcoiner and you want to help spread the word, go ahead and do that. Hit the like button, subscribe, share this video, get the word out there. It really does a lot because I think we've got the right messaging here. We want to help the world. We want to help people with better money. And that is what Bitcoin is. And so for the next part of the show, let's dive into the legal section and dive into the markets here. So we've got the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, and the CFTC aim to facilitate trading of certain spot crypto asset products on registered exchanges, signaling a path for spot Bitcoin trading on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and others. So this is huge news. I mean, of course, we have Trump as the crypto president, the Bitcoin president, and it does seem as if he's got people around him that really want to push Bitcoin and crypto into the regulated financial markets. And so this is huge. I mean, we could see spot Bitcoin being traded on the New York Stock Exchange. You can see the official letter right here, came out last week, September 2nd. And so they're still discussing this, but it looks as if, I mean, when you have these two agencies that usually quabble over whose jurisdiction is what, they're coming together and saying, we want to see this possible. It's a big deal. What do you think about Bitcoin being traded on the New York Stock Exchange?
Yeah, it would be a big deal, like a very big deal, I would argue. I was always surprised, that this didn't came earlier or wouldn't come earlier, just because like you're leaving this entire cake for the crypto exchanges, and that's why probably they've also been able to grow that significantly, and some of them are now like among maybe the most profitable companies on this planet. But I mean, I was always surprised that like the legacy system would just leave it at that, and wouldn't want to get a piece of the action. And so it feels like now under Trump, they're finally getting the hang of it, and they push for it. And coming from the institutional sector, working at the bank, I feel this is another moment where people would say, okay, this thing is not going to go away. We had it with the ETFs, that was really this legitimizing moment where a lot of people also within the bank, which were sort of skeptical and maybe still are somewhat skeptical to the underlying value of Bitcoin and what is it really about? I really don't get it. What is it for? What's the product here actually, But they're like, okay, now it is being traded and I see it's going up. I can make money off of it, and then because it's now in these ETF vehicles, I mean, it's the biggest asset managers around the world who care for this thing, so it won't go away, and so it's another step sort of for people to get orange pilled, and then the same would probably happen with these institutional, like real dominant exchanges, if they could trade spot ETFs, which I think in the end would also, I don't know about the US situation entirely, but could make it more easily accessible for other players, especially here in Switzerland. Some of the players we have when it comes to pension funds and stuff, obviously they have restrictions when it comes to Bitcoin itself, like holding Bitcoin, but it's also, they probably couldn't in any way go to a crypto exchange and hold Bitcoin there. That's why they need to go through these so properly regulated entities and stuff like this, would just help further down the road for them to get acquainted with the asset and then potentially hold it. And so I think that's great news, and it was probably inevitable that we will see it at some point, but seeing it now is certainly great vindication and just exciting.
Yes. SEC Chairman Paul Atkins said, today's joint statement represents a significant step forward in bringing innovation in the crypto asset markets back to America. Market participants should have the freedom to choose where they trade spot crypto assets. So, I mean, all this is like stripping the career risk away from Bitcoin, right? As someone who's been with a banking background, I'm sure many people did not want to even utter the word Bitcoin in a professional setting for fear that they would be ostracized or looked down upon or ridiculed for offering such a thing.
That's true, and at the same time, I think it's also, it wasn't just a career risk, but it was an actual risk created by the regulators themselves. Because like FTX for me, it went offshore for a reason. It was offshore for a reason because it couldn't really do what it wanted to do in the US, and then all of the people were sort of led astray and had to purposely go offshore to trade and really invest in Bitcoin. And I think that was a regulator's fault. Not entirely, obviously. I mean, it was fraud, but having this pushed sort of offshore was certainly something that the regulators can be blamed for. And now bringing it back, as he said, Paul Atkins, to the US and having the oversight, it might not be to the liking to every like OG Bitcoiner who thinks, okay, now this is all going to get integrated into the institutional space, and it's gonna lose some of its flavor, that it had as like the true OG Satoshi style libertarian Bitcoin. But again, there I would also say it was just inevitable, because it is the most interesting thing besides AI, I guess, Bitcoin, the entire industry, and at some point the entire world will dawn on them, and it's now dawning, and so I think it was bound to happen, and if you believe that it was bound to happen, it's a good thing that it's happening now, so to say.
And it's funny you mention FTX and regulators, because that dives right into the next headline here. So the SEC put out a report revealing that nearly a year of texts from former chair Gary Gensler's government phone were lost due to avoidable tech failures during the period of FTX's collapse and other major crypto events. So, I mean, Gary Gensler met privately with SBF. They were buddies. SBF was pushing for laws and regulations to go through before his whole entire operation exploded as the Ponzi scheme unavoidably collapsed under his watch. And so now we have Gary Gensler's cell phone, his records just disappeared. Pretty hard to believe here. I mean, this is the same Gary Gensler whose phone was hacked itself the day before the SEC approved the Bitcoin ETFs. His phone was hacked, and they put out a text or a tweet saying that they were approved a day early. And of course, the market shot up and then crashed. And that kid, I think he was in his early 20s, who did that, is now in jail, right, for hacking his phone. But Gary Gensler will not face any criminal punishment for having his phone records just completely wiped while he was dealing with the collapse of FTX and the biggest stain on his career. Pretty wild what happens over in government, isn't it?
Yeah. No, certainly doesn't really shine a bright light on these guys and what they're up to. I mean, maybe just a short comment, but usually I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in conspiracy theories most of the time. But if I read stuff like this, even my inner conspiracy theorist soul is sort of nudged and like, hey, what's happening here? This can't be true, And I was always surprised, like SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, yeah, SBF. You mentioned it. He was walking around ruminating the floors of DC, and was dining and with these people talking about stuff, and how could they not have seen what's going on here, because they're in the business of regulating, in the business of figuring this out, and they haven't, or they didn't, and so it was always conundrum to me how this could have happened, but in the end we'll never know. But it certainly, as you say, it doesn't foster trust in these institutions, and I think that's what we've been seeing for a couple of years and decades even, like trust in traditional institutions, like regulators, like the central bank, like this is, I think, crumbling away, even though maybe it's not at a point where it's all going to just fall off, a cliff, but it's still surely but slowly it's eroding. And I think stuff like this just doesn't help.
Yeah. And it's funny to think of the politicization of Bitcoin and crypto, right? Because SBF was one of Biden's biggest donors. When he would go and speak in front of Congress, we had Maxine Waters, a congressman of decades. She literally blew him a kiss, right? I have a video of that we posted. And he was meeting privately with Gary Gensler. And then during Biden's regime, his exchange blows up and it's huge pie on their face. And then all the Democrats turn completely anti-crypto, right? There's Elizabeth Warren with the anti-crypto army that she tried to put together there. And so then we had to face 4 years of really trying to march uphill when it came to getting any just common sense stuff done when it comes to Bitcoin and crypto in this country. And now it's completely flipped, right? Trump realized that we are a strong cohort, that we now have not only political power, but also the monetary fuel that can help push a campaign forward. And so they adopted us, and now they are pushing a lot of these things and trying to bring light to former crimes like this, I guess. And also, of course, the laws, the Genius Act that just went through, the Clarity Act that is supposed to come later this fall. So now it's completely flipped. And you could say that Bitcoin sort of has a right-leaning tint on it in America now. Would you say that is also the same in Europe, that Bitcoin is looked as a right-wing phenomenon over there?
Well, probably because of the United States, maybe in some circles for sure, because they're now seeing Trump being all over it, and they're probably not differentiating that he's also doing a lot of shady stuff, with some crypto exchanges and his own meme coin and everything. So I think to that point, I'm not a huge fan of his, pulling these things off, because I think it's also reputational, like a reputation damage to Bitcoin itself, because people just make this association, they hear like, okay, he even sometimes congratulates himself on pushing the price, in the media out loud, like, okay, yeah, welcome guys. And then so that's what people then read, and they're like, okay, yeah, Trump is actually pushing Bitcoin, which is nice. I have to get in as well. But then if they hear what Trump is doing on other things, or with other things, then they're like, okay, there's got to be a connection, even though there's probably not. And so, well, I have no evidence, but I think some people are surely reassured in their opinion. Maybe the ones that were already skeptical of Bitcoin are now like, okay, now I finally know it is this right thing conspiracy in the financial world that I will never touch. But yeah, all things will pass. I think Trump, he will be gone at some point, not in the Oval Office anymore, and then some other dude will be there, but Bitcoin will still be going on, TikTok, block after block, and so things can change again. So it's maybe just short-term, damage, which Bitcoin can always recover from. We know it has, and it will always recover from, I guess.
Yeah, and Bitcoin is for enemies, right? It's for not one political class or group or party. It is for everybody, and it will help those who adopt it and use it to its full capabilities. But right now, we've got the Republicans who are pushing the charge, and the Republicans are in charge of the Treasury and the needing to sell American debt. And so a couple stories with this right now. The U.S. Treasury will sell $100 billion in 4-week bills. This is very short-term debt here, capping a month of record auctions as the 3-month yield drops to 4.139%, below the Fed funds rate for the first time since August 2024, just before the Fed cut rates. So the Fed will come together and have their big decision on rate cuts on September 17th. But as you can see from this great chart here by a friend of the program, Caleb Franzen, definitely check his account out. He'll be coming on the podcast this Wednesday to be released next week. But yes, as you can see here, that he was calling for no rate cuts since September, when they last cut last year before the election. He was saying it's going to stay the same because the 3-month Treasury yield is staying right with the Fed funds rate. And now the 3-month Treasury yield is starting to dip below the Fed funds rate. And that signals that, okay, same thing that happened before the last rate cut. So we're probably going to see one at this next meeting. And that's very important, right? America is $37 trillion in debt. They need to refinance close to $9 to $10 trillion worth of this debt within the next 12 months. And so they want to bring these interest rates down so that they don't have to spend trillions in just interest, right? Because that really is just a black hole. And that is how things get out of control when you can no longer service this giant debt. As a European, what do you think of the American debt situation? And is anybody talking about it in the news over there?
Yeah, obviously, yeah, the debt situation, it is news as well. Like there's a lot of doomers and gloomers, who are like, okay, this is not going to go well. And in the end, I think I was one of these people as well, who always thought, okay, this is going to blow up any time, and nowadays I'm not so sure anymore, just because, as you just explained, like people at the Fed, at the Treasury, they have their tools, they always seem to have another ace up their sleeve to kind of figure out the situation and like just kick the can further down the road, and obviously, a lot of people here also in Europe are kind of, okay, situation here is not as bad, even though in some countries I think it is as well. Obviously, Europe has a lot of problems as well when it comes to the economy, and we might not have the entire like AI boom and economy who's taking up the brunt and can still sort of create some jobs and just help with productivity gains and stuff, So in the end, it is being discussed. But as I said, I think I'm of the belief that this can probably be prolonged a lot longer than people usually think, and that's maybe also an unconventional opinion that I have, and still being a Bitcoiner. I do believe that they will keep the system running, but at the expense of us savers, of all the people who keep their harder money in the normal fiat money. And so there won't be ever like this huge default coming our way, but it's going to be like a silent default by just debasing the currency, and that's happening. And even under Trump, which is interesting, like even because he had this whole Dodge policy where he wanted to cut jobs. And I think I just saw some of the latest numbers. I think he actually is cutting jobs at the federal level in the US, but it doesn't make that much of a difference. If you look at the latest data, and it's also this from the Bipartisan Policy Center that you guys have over in the US. Like deficit spending this year is still on track to outpace each of the prior 3 years. Obviously there was a COVID year and 2021. After COVID, this was sort of a situation which got out of hand. But like if you look at 2022, 2023, and 2024, 2025 is still, when it comes to deficit spending, at the highest level, and we're still only in September, and we have a couple of months left. So yeah, deficit is bound to go higher, and the more the deficit goes higher, the more they need to finance, the more they need to sort of get the money from somewhere, and that's all bullish Bitcoin's narrative. And so I don't see why this shouldn't change anytime soon.
Yes, as Lynn Alden says, nothing stops this train. This debt is going to continue to grow. And you're right, it might not happen overnight, as some Bitcoiners say, where the debt just explodes and there's hyperinflation in the dollar. But as you can see, over the last 100 years, the dollar's lost 95% of its value, and that train is not going to stop. So what should you do? You got to get yourself some Bitcoin. And where do we say to go get your Bitcoin? Well, we say head over to Rhino. Rhino is the sponsor of the show, and we are very glad and proud to have them. And why is that? That is because Rhino is an all-in-one Bitcoin app built for Bitcoiners. You can buy or sell your Bitcoin instantly, right? Just go log in, set up your account, send over some cash, buy your Bitcoin. You got it right there. And then once you have it, you can send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. You can withdraw your Bitcoin straight to cold storage, and you can turn your sats right into gift cards all in the app. And if you're into cold storage, as you should be, if you're looking into a multi-sig solution, Rhino works with Casa. So you can plug in your Rhino wallet as a part of a 3 of 5 multi-sig wallet right there with Casa in the app. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon you'll be able to pay your bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and stack for retirement without leaving the app. So go ahead, download Rhino at rhinobitcoin.com, or just tap the link below in the YouTube description. Use code Bitcoin News and Rhino will drop you $10 in free Bitcoin into your account today. So secure your stack with Rhino, the good friends of this show. Thank you so much to Rhino. And go and check it out, people. rhinobitcoin.com. Good people, good team. If you have any questions, they will answer all of them. So, yes, Pascal, before you go, I need to talk to you about this along with the debt situation. We sort of had a tweet go viral this morning about Russia. Russia was talking about these stable coins and the debt situation, and pretty wild what they said here. Bring this up. So this is Russia's right-hand man, Putin's right-hand man, Anton Kobayakov. So he's calling it out at the Eastern Economic Forum in front of a live studio audience, saying that this is these stable coins are part of America's scheme to shove $35 trillion worth of debt into these stable coins, devalue the dollar over time, and spread this debt around the world through the stable coins, and then reset the system once the debt situation is in a more favorable aspect for America. So do you think that this is true? I mean, you always hear that these American politicians say the stable coins are here to entrench dollar hegemony. And that's essentially what this means, right? You can say it the nice way, entrench dollar hegemony and strengthen the dollar. Or you could look at it from the Russian perspective and say, no, they're just trying to offload their debt on all the third world nations around the world and try to get out with a get out of jail free card using these stable coins. What do you think?
Yeah. No, that guy is certainly calling a spade a spade. I think he's calling it out, and in the end, it's true. Yeah, stable coins. Obviously there is some proof of value to the dollar. It might not be as a store of value as we just explored and established, but it might be as a transactional mean, as a medium of exchange, and that's undoubtedly the case. And then also like a currency of settlement. In so many jurisdictions, even beyond the US itself. So I call this a proof of value that the dollar still has, while Bitcoin has the proof of work, and the dollar has some proof of value. It might also have the proof of violence, and that's encapsulated in that meme, with the flight aircraft carrier, in the sea that we know of. So there's two proofs of value and violence to the US dollars. And I think, in the end, that's why a lot of people around the world are adopting the US dollar, And the other thing is really in countries where the currency, the fiat currency, is even shittier. It's like there's the real hyperinflation. I mean, again, what are they turning to? They turn to the dollar because it's the most well-known currency because of the network effects it has. And there it even might function and act as a store of value short term. And that's why I guess people are turning to these stable coins. And so I wouldn't cry or outcry, or let's just say put it down completely that it's just a weapon. It does its harm for sure, but it also serves some people well, especially in third world countries. As I said in the beginning, I was traveling around in the South Americas and like in the Middle East, and people are actually looking to these sorts of dollars, and mostly in stable coins, especially the younger people. They also try to earn in these stable coin currencies. So I think, but in the end, it's probably true that this will help the US to kind of counteract all the forces that are going on that have been pushing towards de-dollarization, and stable coins are now discovered as this tool where they can shove their debt down the third world people. And I was already calling for this way back in 2018 when Libra, the original project by Facebook, was announced. I was like, I had this call that Libra is going to be approved because of this, because I felt like the US people will, it will dawn on them that this will help their currency. And obviously back then they didn't connect the dots just yet. That's why Libra was turned down, and my call was actually wrong. But now, I guess years later, I think they figured it out just in another iteration with these stablecoins that have now taken off. And so that's why I think it is a macro force now pulling, on all these strings. And to some, it's detrimental. To others, it's beneficial. And it's probably never as black and white. But yeah, I think that's what people need to understand for sure.
You're completely right. And tip my hat to you to see that Libra could have fulfilled this role many years ago if they were smart enough to actually let it go through, but they didn't. No, now they're accepting of Tether and USDC, and they see that they are huge buyers of treasuries, and that's what they need, because the rest of the world is starting to turn their back to US debt, and these guys are stepping up in a big way to continue to consume it. And now I'd like to pivot into our last story of the day, the title story, which is Friday night, MSTR. They were supposed to see if they were going to get included in the S&P 500, which would be a big win for just Bitcoin adoption, Bitcoin recognition. But they were denied. 5:15 p.m. the news came out, and AppLovin, a AI app building company, as well as Robinhood, of course, the favorite degens platform to trade stocks and options and crypto too. Those two companies were accepted, but strategy was left out in the cold. And one thing that I learned in all this is that it's committee driven, right? You have to reach certain criteria, of course, in terms of profitability and liquidity, and which strategy blew out of the water, especially in the Q2 when it comes to profitability. And they're one of the most traded stocks in the market. But what I found out is that the committee is completely unknown. They don't know who these people are. I mean, it's not public knowledge, right? And they are the ones with the final say. This committee is the same group that denied Tesla the first time around that they were eligible to be joined. So pretty wild. Pretty disheartening for MSTR holders who have been holding through this winter into the spring, into the summer of just downward price action since last November, all-time high above $540. And so, yeah, can you give any words of encouragement to MSTR holders? Where do you think this is going? And do you believe in the strategy vision?
Well, yeah, I mean, I myself, I am no strategy holder, no MSTR holder. I am still just plain old vanilla Bitcoin, but I'm probably watching it from the sidelines, because I think it's very interesting. And obviously, yeah, it's what can I say? I mean, they were not included. Why weren't they included? We can probably only speculate. As you said, there is this active committee, which is supposed to go by rules, and it's a rule-based system. But in the end, they have the final say, and they can always sort of chime in and say, okay, this is now against our rules, but just like subjectively speaking, because like the real rules that were out there, MSTR met them all, and so that's why people were sort of really expecting it to be included. And so we don't know what it is. I guess in the end, it's probably just, again, the career risk thing. Some people are not over this yet. They're like, okay, we don't know what the actual business model of strategy is. What is the product that they're selling? I mean, so many Bitcoiners aren't understanding this. I'm just now doing a lot of podcast episodes on this with people, trying to wrap my head around, okay, what are they actually doing? What is the product? And I feel like I have a decent understanding now, but I'm still learning myself. And so if a lot of Bitcoiners don't even understand this yet, then why should these people who don't even care about Bitcoin, And that's why they're probably looking at this and they're saying, okay, this has just like a Bitcoin business model, but we don't understand what they're doing. It's too volatile. It's too Bitcoin centric. And that's why we can't afford to getting it into our sort of index, and so it will probably take another couple of months, maybe even years. At some point, it will be inevitable again. It was the same with Tesla and MicroStrategy. I think if they can play all the cards right and pull on the right strings, especially with all the preferred shares that they're now having, which is like a way maybe for them to also survive a longer prolonged downturn and maybe even a job consolidation or even an outright bear market, And so I think MSTR will be around for the foreseeable future. And that's why I also believe at some point they will be included, and then Bitcoin will become part of every portfolio, so to say, because nowadays all the people are holding a slice of the S&P 500. And as I said, this is just a matter of time until this happens. And I read this one comment just to finish this off. Like a lot of people were like, okay, MSTR doesn't really need the S&P inclusion, S&P 500 inclusion, but at some point the S&P 500 will need MSTR, and I think that's probably correct, because MSTR is still like powered by Bitcoin, and if Bitcoin does what it usually does, and then I think this will trickle through to MSTR itself, and that's why S&P 500 committee will probably scratch their heads in a couple of years and like, oh, why didn't we do it? Maybe they will then have the reputational damage down the road. But yeah, we'll see how this will play out.
Yeah, I think it is just a matter of time. Saylor was on CNBC this morning, said pretty much the same, that he wasn't surprised that they were not included at this first quarter of eligibility, but more and more regulators, bankers, politicians are understanding the power of Bitcoin. They're understanding what MSTR is as this Bitcoin engine, essentially selling financial products that are of different levels of volatility based off of that Bitcoin holdings that they own. And the S&P 500, you could say that it's a matter of national security here in America, whether it comes to tax receipts or retirement. Or just general social order. They want to see that number go up and to the right. All the politicians love it. It makes everything easier for them. So Bitcoin and will need to be a part of that narrative. And the easiest way for it to be so is through MSTR at the moment, right? They've got 3% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist. And so it's be pretty easy to get Bitcoin into, or Bitcoin exposure, at least, into big people's retirement accounts by just adding MSTR to the S&P 500. So Pascal, yes, that is our hour. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us today. Tell people where they can find more stuff about you and your podcast.
Yes, for sure. So yeah, they can hit up Less Noise, More Signal. It's as it's normally spelled, Less Noise, More Signal. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even Rumble nowadays, because they're sort of open to Bitcoin, so you have to be on Rumble, yeah, that's where you can find the podcast. And then yeah, if you want to follow me, you can also follow me on X under PAHUEG, Pahweg, the Americans usually say it. And yeah, you will also find me on LinkedIn or wherever. I mean, if you truly look for my name, you will find me, and I'd be happy to yeah, just chat with some of the people that were listening as well. So thanks, Rob, for having me, and yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Yes, this has been the Bitcoin News Weekly live breakdown of our newsletter that comes out every Monday morning. Sign up for the newsletter. Show up at 11 a.m. Eastern every single Monday on X, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the great places. Join us. Join the conversation. Thanks for being there today. Really enjoyed this one with you, Pascal, and would love to have you again in the future.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.